You are welcome to the Messiah Revelation channel, which is a prophetic end time ministry. We are dedicated to preparing the world for the arrival of the Messiah. One of the things which is on the calendar of the Messiah is the gathering or the regathering of the scattered of Israel and the dispersed of Judah. And a lot of people are distorting the identity of the Hebrew Israelites who are scattered over the world. This video is dedicated to examining how they are distorting the Hebrew identity of black people who are scattered over the world, and they are using black people to do the deception and the distortion. I was watching a video and I saw two white men doing presentation, and they were interviewing a black man, I believe an African American. This man was formerly a member of the Hebrew Israelites in the United States, and he left. So he joined the Hebrew Israelite quote-unquote movement, and for some reason he left the movement, and they are using him to discredit the Hebrew Israelite movement or the Hebrew Israelite group. They asked him questions about the Hebrew Israelite movement, and he answered the questions, and they used his answers, his testimony, his experience to distort the Hebrew Israelite identity, and they concluded that the Hebrew Israelite organizations in the United States are a cult. So if you are a member of the Hebrew Israelite movement, their conclusion is that you are a member of a cult. And they are basing the argument on the testimony, quote unquote, of someone who used to be in the Hebrew Israelite movement, an American, a young guy. I was watching the video, so I'm using this opportunity to go over what I saw, the deception and the distortion of the identity of the Hebrews who are scattered over the world. This gentleman started by saying that he came from a family without a role model, quote unquote. He didn't have a father figure, and so he didn't know about his identity, and that's why he joined the Hebrew Israelite movement. His argument is that the Hebrew Israelite movement is a movement of black people, and they are looking for an identity. They don't have the identity. They are looking for an identity, and so they fall on the Bible narrative of the Jews, quote unquote, who were in captivity in Egypt, and Moses led them out of captivity in Egypt. And the argument goes this way, that for black people in America, I'm talking about the so-called African Americans, the argument is that because they have lost their identity, because there's no role model, they are using the experience of, quote unquote, the Jews in Egypt. They are using it to inspire the black population in America, and they are drawing connection between the struggle of the Jews in Egypt and over the world, even in America, and the struggle and how it relates to or is compared to the civil rights movement in America. The conclusion is that there's nothing like black Hebrews. The so-called Hebrew Israelite movement, they are just taking consolation in comparing themselves to Jews, but they are not. They are just drawing inspiration from the Bible narrative of the Jews, definitely the 1948 people who, quote unquote, the Jews who were in Israel. And this guy, the African American guy, who was a member of the Hebrew Israelite movement who left, he also gave information about how certain Bible scriptures are distorted by the Hebrew Israelite movement, and how some of them do not even believe in the Messiah. And these are some of the reasons why he left the Hebrew Israelite movement. And because he has left the Hebrew Israelite movement, white men are using him as their expert witness to create the impression that the Hebrew Israelite movement is a cult. And they were wearing t-shirts, and the t-shirts, the word cultish was written on the t-shirt. And so the distortion is going on, the deception is going on, that the blacks who are claiming that they are Hebrew Israelites are not true Hebrews, but they are actually trying to bask in the identity of the Jews. And so don't take them serious. It's a very dangerous deception, particularly where the deception is being orchestrated by using Negroes, the face of black men, particularly those who formally claim to be members of the Hebrew Israelite movement in the United States. So I'm using this opportunity to clarify certain things. The first thing is using black people in America to make a point that black people are not the Hebrews. I will dwell on that. The black guy who was interviewed, he said he didn't have a father, so he didn't have a father model in his family. He was looking for an identity, and he found it in the Hebrew Israelite movement. In the same way that some black people find their identity in the Nation of Islam. They become members of Hebrew Israelite movement or the Nation of Islam because they are quote unquote looking for an identity. And there's nothing like a black Hebrew. And so the Hebrew Israelite movement is false, is a cult. We have to remember that the Hebrews are scattered over the world, and these are black people who are scattered over the world. And it is not only in the United States where the black Hebrews are scattered. The transatlantic slave trade resulted in the scattering of the Hebrews to all the four corners of the earth, including Brazil, including the West Indies. And if you look at history, history will tell you that a lot of the people who started the Hebrew Israelite movement in the world, their origin is in West Indies. And it means that the Hebrew Israelite movement is not confined only to the United States. And so nobody can distort the identity of the Hebrews just by focusing on black people or Negroes in the United States. If you look at Isaiah 11:11, you notice that the prophet prophesied the places where the Hebrew Israelites will be gathered from. In Isaiah 11:11, it is not talking only about the United States. It's talking about Elam, Patros, it's talking about Cush, talking about Egypt, talking about Assyria, and talking about the islands, plural, the islands of the sea. Definitely US is considered an island of the sea, but so is the West Indies, and definitely there are Hebrews who are scattered in places, and I'm sure they did not go on ships, because when the prophet is talking about Cush as one of the places where the dispersed of Judah and the outcasts of Israel will be gathered from, it means that the regathering will occur in so many places. And so the conclusion I want to draw is that you cannot distort the true identity of the black Hebrew, even if you succeed in distorting the history of black people who are in the United States. It must be noted here that Deuteronomy 28:68, that talks about Hebrews being taken as captives in ships into Egypt again. That prophecy is very, very important when we are talking about the Hebrews who were kidnapped and shipped to the United States. So the United States is very, very important when we're talking about the identity of the real Hebrews who are Negroes. So the point I'm making is that the U.S. is very important. The blacks in the U.S. are very important when we're talking about the identity of the true Hebrews. And people are distorting that. They are using black people who are in the United States, including those who were members of the Hebrew Israelite movement and who have left the movement. And I believe that those people who are being used, the former members of the Hebrew Israelite movement, they have been deceived. And I could gather from the presentation that this person was giving on the video that the person doesn't have revelation. I'm not sure whether he has read important books that shed light on the Hebrew identity of the Negroes. And I'm not sure whether he has read the book by John Johnson, The Black Biblical Heritage. And that is very, very important in looking at the presence of Negroes in the Bible. I'm not sure he has read the book written by From Babylon to Timbuktu, Windsor, Rudolph Windsor, From Babylon to Timbuktu, and that traces the history of the Negroes, the Hebrews, tracing their history throughout Africa, following the final desolation of Jerusalem in AD 70, and when these Negroes, Hebrews, fled Jerusalem and settled in places including Timbuktu in West Africa. And I'm not sure that this former member of the Hebrew Israelite is even aware of the books, the volume of research done by our own brother and Ronald Darton from Hebrews to Negroes, a 4-volume book that would shed light on the identity of the Hebrews, those that people have changed their identity to be Negroes. And so what I'm saying is that when they try to distort the identity of the Hebrews, they do it out of ignorance. The people who were doing the presentation, they were white people. I believe they are ignorant in the sense that their knowledge base is very low, having read only books written by Europeans, and they are not aware of the volume of research. The books that are cited, they haven't read it. They haven't read the book by Rudolph Windsor, from Babylon to Timbuktu. They haven't read the book, Miseducation of the Negroes. They haven't read it. And I'm sure that they don't even know the history of Africa, because I don't think the history of Africa will be taught in America. I don't think the history of Africa will be taught in Netherlands. So children in Netherlands are not taught the history of Netherlands' involvement in the enslavement of black people, including the enslavement of Negroes, including the enslavement of Hebrews from the slave coast of West Africa, actually from the kingdom of Judah in West Africa. So I don't blame the white people who were doing the presentation, discrediting the Hebrew Israelite movement, and I don't blame the black man that they use to provide evidence that Hebrew Israelite movement is a cult. Definitely there are certain doctrines propagated by the Hebrew Israelite movement. It's not every doctrine that I will agree with, but that does not repudiate their claim that the real Hebrews are Negroes. That fact is clear, is supported by the Bible, the prophecy in Deuteronomy 28, particularly 28:68, is supported by the prophecy in Zephaniah 3:10. The true worshippers of God will in the future go to Mount Zion to give their offering to Elohim, and they will come from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. The rivers of Ethiopia is not the rivers of it's not the rivers of Sakahina River in the United States. It's not talking about the Ganges in India. It's talking about Africa. The true worshippers of Elohim will come from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. And from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia covers the African continent and beyond the African continent, including the island of the sea, United States, where Hebrews from the slave coast of West Africa, where Hebrews from the kingdom of Judah that was located in West Africa, they were taken, and they were taken in ships to places beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. And so I will encourage anybody who is distorting the history of or the identity of the black Hebrews. I will encourage them to increase their knowledge base by reading the books that I listed. The Black Biblical Heritage by John Johnson, and from Babylon to Timbuktu, Rudolph Windsor, and particularly the volumes of research done by Ronald Darton from Hebrews to Negroes. If somebody doesn't want to read those books, it means that the person has a prejudiced mind. The person doesn't want to come into revelation because he has made up his mind. He will rely on distorted history. Definitely, he will not benefit from the rich research that has been done. And that person is not even familiar with somebody like Sheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese scholar who in 1974 defeated a bunch of European, Arab, and Asian scholars on the issue of who was responsible for the civilization that occurred in Egypt. Who were the original Egyptians? Were they Arabs or were they black people? It took the United Nations, UNESCO, to organize a symposium in 1974 to correct the distorted historical facts, and they finally accepted the work done by Sheikh Anta Diop, a Senegalese scholar. His skin is too dark, but his ideas threw light on the falsehood and distortion of history. Having established that the civilization that occurred in Egypt was the result of black people, at the time when the so-called philosophers in Greece did not have any idea about the philosophies that were in Africa, and they had to come to Egypt to study under the mantle of black philosophers. In this way, philosophy, mathematics spread from Egypt to Europe. And when there was a university in Timbuktu in West Africa, there was no Harvard University, there were no Oxford University. And I believe that if this fact is known by people, then they'll be able to present information about history, including the true identity of the Hebrew Israelites. And I would like to comment that discussing the identity of the Hebrews is not only based upon books that are written, it's based also on visions that the Lord has shown people. And I'm glad to report the vision that I've had regarding the regathering of the African Americans who are Hebrews, in a vision that I saw in October the 30th, 2007. And so my assertion that the Hebrews are the Negroes is not based upon the Bible, is also based upon scholarship done by intellectuals who have international recognition, but they are not recognized just because their skin color is black. And so if somebody wants to live in ignorance because of racial prejudice, he can go ahead, but he cannot distort the identity of the Hebrews who are Negroes. I am an African. I am an Ashanti from Ghana, born in Ghana, and by revelation, I'm a Hebrew, based upon oral tradition given to me by my grandmother, who was not educated. And the oral tradition still exists. The oral tradition has been the means of communicating the history of the true Hebrews as recorded in the Bible, as recorded in the history of the true Israelites, the outcasts of Israel and the dispersed of Judah. And so they can distort the identity of the Hebrew by using black men, including so-called former members of Hebrew Israelite movement, but they will not succeed in distorting the identity of the true Hebrews, because Elohim himself will raise his men and women in the end times to awaken the Hebrews before they are gathered from all the places where they were scattered to, consistent with the prophecy in Zechariah, prophecy in Jeremiah, and prophecy in Isaiah. Thank you for watching this video.